All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. We skipped a week, but we're back, and that's what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
It feels like we've not done this in a hot minute. 1 week feels like eternity at this point. What's new with you, man? How's everything going?
Things are good. Yeah, a lot of new people signing up, getting ready. It's kind of like that planning time leading towards Q3, Q4. So
Yeah.
some folks kind of slowing down selling in general, but really assessing
Mhm.
performance, things like that, and trying to optimize for these few months leading up to Q4.
Yeah.
But yeah, steady goes the ship. Last Wednesday was a good beach day, but excited to be back on with everybody today.
Nice. Yeah. So Q4 is coming up. Black Friday is coming up. That's going to be awesome for a lot of sellers. Not a ton of prep you can do on the selling side, but a lot, especially if you're doing OA, a lot of good deals to purchase on the OA front, probably RA front too. But I don't see the value in going through that pure chaos, because I feel like just the amount you can get and the amount of stores you can hit with the long lines and pure chaos, probably not worth it. But on the OA front, people are going to be crushing it. It's funny how most of the buying holidays, if you will, are purchasing holidays. I'm going to use purchasing instead of buying because they're also buying for OA sellers. So kind of hilarious when people don't understand much about this industry. They're like, why are people spending so much money during Black Friday and all these things? And like, it's probably sellers. Right? Did I say Black Friday? I meant Prime Day. Sorry, Prime Day. Goodness, it's been a long day. Prime Day is coming up. I just saw Megan Thee Stallion in one of the Prime Day ads. So they're really pushing it right now, which is cool. So hopefully it's a really good time for sales, both being a seller and, actually purchasing things for inventory. But yeah, a lot of things coming up, a lot of new users coming through, which is exciting. I know early stage, we track this. I look at it every day because I'm a psycho, but early stage users have just been growing and growing and growing, which is amazing. It's nice because when we first launched this, the hopes were, how do we, basically democratize this cutting edge technology like AI, via Maven, Hyperdrive, our amazing support team, you guys, and give that access to sellers who are doing less than 10K a month, who, for, getting started, $100 a month is actually quite a lot from your cash flow perspective, right? If you're doing $5,000 a month, $100 kind of eats into it, right? I'd rather you spend $100 a month on inventory than on yet another software. But we've been able to reduce that cost. And when we first launched it, we were kind of like, all right, let's see how it goes. And we had to make 0 changes to it so far, which has been amazing. So we put a lot of time and effort and thought into building that out. And luckily it's been resonating. And now it's just getting more and more people into it every single day. And so it's just been, fun. It's been fulfilling. I think too, a lot of what we do from a software perspective, I think can be very analytical and should be. But I think it's very easy for a lot of software companies to kind of only view numbers and not think about the people that they serve. And this is something that, like, even when we're hiring and building out the team, is like part of our culture is like, we're here to serve. Like, we're massively having an impact on people's lives and helping a lot of people go from this is a hobby to I quit my job because you guys helped me scale revenue and all these great things. Which has just been phenomenal. Actually, I got tagged in a Twitter post. I think it was yesterday or sometime last night, and somebody was like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about leaving, their current repricing tool and going over to Aura. Was it anybody have any recommendations?" And somebody was basically like, "Yeah, just do it." What did she say? She said she's in awe. I posted it in our Slack channel here. I'm going to pull it up because I thought it was amazing. This is how I woke up this morning. So the person said, I've been hearing good things about Aura for repricing, considering switching over from their current one and sharing my thoughts here. What do you guys think? And then one of our users jumped in and said, I'm kind of awed by it right now. Customer service is 100% also. And they switched from the tool that person was switching from. And then that person said, thanks for sharing. What are you in all about? Sales above buy box consistently. I love that that's the question the person asked, because that's something we see very routinely. And it's what people talk about. They're like, holy crap, I did not expect this. I've heard about it, but to experience it is its own thing. And then the person or user responded back with stuff's flying out the door. Spot check. Yes, I'll do a thorough check at the end of the month. But basically she's going to be like, hey, here's the exact details to share with that person. But I just thought it was amazing. I love being able to wake up to these kind of things because especially as a founder and just everybody on the team, this is what drives us. This is the whole reason why we wake up and do what we do. It's less about I've always talked about, and I'm doing it tonight on a webinar. Like, I'm Mr. Scale. I like things that scale, but how do you scale impact, and how do you, like, that's our big question, right? Like, we've been able to develop and have such a massive impact for people. Now the question is, how do we do that same thing at the same quality at 10x the scale we're currently at? And that's a big challenge, but that's a challenge worth doing. Not just we want more revenue. Like, that's like cool. Don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist, but at the end of the day, really want to scale that impact, because that to me is like legacy and all these fun things that you get to dive deeper into. But yeah, it's been awesome, man. I know you've been busy in support, helping a bunch of new people out.
Yeah, it's been really exciting, and I definitely just want to like double down on your statement of us kind of focusing on everyone and being here to serve. Like, there's so many
Yeah.
companies that I've worked for in the past, and just companies out there that prioritize those customers that pay them more. Granted, that makes sense for some business models, but for us, we really wanted to give even those newer sellers who need the most help access to
Yeah.
me via chat. Finn has been crushing onboarding calls as well. If you haven't had an onboarding call with
Yeah.
him, jump into chat. He's actually running our chat right now, and he'll be able to send over his availability.
Yeah.
But really just giving access and that knowledge and that extra guidance to folks that are really just getting started, who need it to make that big impact, is really what the early stage program is all about. And then as your revenue starts to grow, your plan will grow with it. Some people are hesitant, like, why is my plan growing? It's like, you're actually making more money and we're helping you do that. So that's why it's growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really nice to kind of have that
Mhm.
influence on those folks just getting started and point them in the right direction so that they do see the results that they're looking for. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really fun to kind of work with those new users getting up and running there.
Yeah, and Finn's been opening up his availability, so I think he's doing like 6 onboardings today alone. So like, we're really scaling these up, adding more availability to be able to do those things. So you don't have to wait, a week or so to get in there. Love this, Dylan. Great name, by the way. Relatable content made my entire friend group that sells switch over to Aura, and we have all been blown away for happy customers and counting. Love that, Dylan. That means a ton for us that you did that word of mouth. That's phenomenal. See, 2 of the 4 went from 97 tier to 197 per month tier, and we are more than happy to pay it when they saw the results also. That's the whole thing, right? It's like when we sat down, when we relaunched Aura 1.0, the current version, we really wanted to think through pricing and packaging in a way that made sense for our users, not just what we wanted. And we played around with so many different models, and we looked at the competition, and we're like, man, none of what they're doing rationally makes sense when you get down to it. It's very the analogy versus first principles argument, right? Analogy is, well, this is how everybody else does it. This is what's expected. Let's do it that way. And I think that happens far too obvious, or far too many times, far too common in our space. And when we sat down and said, well, let's just kind of question all these things and look at the data and see what the data tells us, in like our user data, right? And turns out most of the way people are doing pricing is actually, it makes 0 sense. And so we wanted it to make a lot of sense. We wanted people to be like, heck yeah, I'm happy to pay you more, because like, I'm making more. This is amazing. And like, this is what we hoped to get from the pricing and packaging updates we did at the end of last year, which is just phenomenal. See, BWC Deals jumping in here. What's good, my friends? Heard a lot of good things about you all. Dylan, we need to get on a call soon. Really think we can help each other out. Would love to. Yeah, send me an email. I know we were chatting a few months back. Let's see here. Alan, hello for Canadian offers. Do I use my US COG for max min, or will I have to estimate? Casey, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, so for that, Alan, you'll definitely want to make sure that you enter your costs in Canadian dollars. I think it's Canadian dollars. Having a little
CAD,
bit of a
yeah.
brain CAD, okay. Brain fog right there. But yeah, just so that Aura can properly configure your prices in CAD, you want to enter those costs in as CAD.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alan, I don't have like an online conversion tool off the top of my head, but there's definitely some out there that you can use to kind of enter in those
Google.
US costs. Yeah, Google will do it for you as well.
If I'm not mistaken, the USD to CAD conversion doesn't fluctuate terribly, like it's not incredibly volatile. If you're doing this in a currency that is very volatile, like the actual currency conversion rate, I would take the average of that currency conversion over the last, whatever period to kind of smooth it out. But yeah, you're basically wanting to localize your COGS to the market that you're selling to. That's the best way to do that. CAD, again, doesn't fluctuate too much from USD, if I'm not mistaken, last I looked at it. So you should be able to, you can actually just go to Google and say, 20 USD to CAD, it'll give you that and show you the chart of the currency conversion rate over a period. So if it's relatively stable, I think it is. I know Canada's having some interesting political problems right now, so it could be affecting that. But just take a look. And if you need help, please reach out. Happy to help. See, Fran has a good one here. Guys, need some help. My current price on Aura is different from the listing itself. Seems like the price is not being updated and stuck from 10 hours ago, according to the pricing activity. How can I resolve it? So without taking a deeper dive, it's going to be hard to say. What I will say, Fran, jump into live chat now, Finn's in there, and just reach out with that particular listing, that SKU, and have him take a look. He'll be able to tell you exactly what's happening. Where my mind immediately goes is you're actually out of stock. And it's just kind of confusing for whatever reason. Or there could be a marketplace connection issue, which I think is less likely the case. Assuming you're still getting price updates, period, that's not going to be the case. It's most likely going to be isolated to that particular listing. But Casey, if there's anything you want to add on to that.
Nothing to add on there, friend. A few months ago, we did have a very extremely rare bug where some price updates for listings that had Hyperdrive active were actually delaying that price. That was resolved a few months ago. This may be one more instance of it popping back up. So yeah, definitely chat in with Finn. He'll be able to get that sorted and pass over any discrepancies to our engineering team to make sure everything's running smoothly there.
Awesome. Yeah, and Fran says that they do have Hyperdrive active. So yeah, that could actually be the case. So yeah, let's reach out to the support, get that sorted out. See Jonathan jumping in here. Nice hat. Appreciate that. That is my souvenir from the, what's the big museum in New York? Is it Natural History? I think it's the Natural History Museum. They had a whole section of like cool, nerdy space stuff, and all the kids were having fun. And then there was just my 32-year-old self being like, haha, space. And I got this hat and some astronaut ice cream, and I walked around and they told me I couldn't eat it, but I did it anyways. Astronaut ice cream is one of the few things that I genuinely get excited about. And I know it's so unhealthy and horrible for you. But it makes me feel like a child, especially when I walk around looking at like dinosaurs. You know what I mean? Like I've got my NASA hat on, eating astronaut ice cream, wowing at dinosaur fossils. And my wife's just like, you're a child. Yes, that's true. Because in Florida, we don't have a whole lot of good museums. At least where I grew up. So, traveling to Boston, living in Boston and then going to New York for a weekend, I'm just like, yeah, this is amazing. And also that's where theoretically the night at the museum took place. So I'm immediately just like, when are these guys coming alive? Because I'm just a big, 90s Disney dork. And that's amazing. Let's see, Anthony, a good example of setting up a unsuppressed buy box strategy. Casey, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, Anthony. So the buy box targeting strategy does already have a pre-configured setting for suppressed buy boxes. If you're under the pursuit section, it'll say when the buy box becomes suppressed. The default setting is going to say customize price minus 2 cents. Or current price minus 2 cents. What that will do is it'll slowly drop your price by 2 cents every few minutes. The goal there is to try to unsuppress the buy box. So that drop will occur until the buy box becomes reactivated or until your min price is reached, at which point it'll hold you there until the buy box does become active. Feel free to reconfigure those settings as you'd like, but those are our best recommendations for unsuppressing the buy box without losing too much margin. If you increase that figure higher than 2 cents, it's going to drop your price much more quickly. So you'll want to maybe start there, make sure that's set properly, and then adjust accordingly if needed.
Yeah, and Maven will do this automatically by default, assuming you have not unchecked that in the settings. It will just automatically basically attempt to unsuppress the buy box. There are cases where you won't be able to unsuppress it because the range at which Amazon will unsuppress it could be below your min price. So do be aware of that. You always want to look at, I tend to say, compare this to the Keepa data and look at kind of where it tends to be at. If you're off by order of magnitude from where the buy box tends to be at, you're going to have to go a little bit lower to pull that. That may or may not make sense depending on if you're still getting sales or not. Welcome to Amazon. There's always exceptions. There are cases where you're still getting enough sales profitably without a buy box, in which case it can work. But again, that's going to be more of an exception than the rule. What I tend to say is you really want to unsuppress buy boxes. Like you're losing out a vast quantity of velocity of sales. So you definitely want to reactivate that. But absolutely great question there. Kind of going back to what we were talking about previously, Casey, in terms of like, thinking about and building things for sellers, not just like, because I mean, we think everything we do is kind of cool, but you find that overlap. But there's some stuff we're working on right now. We're running some demo tests actually this week, and showcasing what we've been developing kind of in secret. So some stealth mode stuff. And a lot of the conversations has been like, oh, I didn't see that coming in. Like, oh, okay, like that's pretty sick. And so really trying to take that a step further, right? It's like, how do we democratize? I'm a big fan of a guy named Peter Diamandis. He's got a handful of books. His big thing is like, exponential curves, like exponential growth on technology. And he's got this thing called the 6Ds. Don't remember all of them. But basically he argues that once something becomes digitized, a lot of things change. The good example here is like you have manual physical cameras. Then the iPhone could do it, right? And then all of a sudden everything changed. Like the quality of it started to ramp up incredibly fast. We got 4K on our phones now. And so you democratize it because it comes dramatically cheaper. You digitize it, which is even better. And there's 4 other Ds, again, that I don't recall. And the point here that I'm trying to make, though, is for us, that's a big philosophical driver for making product. I don't think software should be this incredibly expensive thing. I think there's a balance between having good margins and being able to grow revenue and profits as a company, and also democratizing capabilities like AI and things like that in a way that makes sense. Because my kind of mental model for this is, if you took the cost out of it, would it objectively be better for everyone to use it? Yes. Okay, then therefore you should develop your pricing and packaging to make it as accessible as possible, not create this false sense of scarcity. And that's what a lot of software companies do. They create this false sense of scarcity by inflating the price point. I don't really love that. And obviously we're not going to be open source. We're not just going to say, cool, it's free. That doesn't make sense. So finding that balance really makes a ton of sense. And so the thing we're working on right now, which, obviously I can't share quite yet, takes that to yet another level, in terms of just giving you access, again, democratizing things that you otherwise would not get access to, and making it so affordable to get access to it that it's just a complete game changer. So I'm super pumped about that.
Yeah, been working on some very interesting things behind the curtains over here. So hopefully
Yeah.
we can share that with everyone soon. But yeah, just giving people access to things and then pricing it based on whether it's usage, performance, or things like that tends to be a much more user-friendly model that we've seemed to really kind of embrace recently. Yeah.
Exactly. See, Christine has a cool question here. Just joined a few minutes late, and I'm new, still in my trial. I'm loving Aura so far. Where can I learn more about Hyperdrive? So I can actually expand on that. So Hyperdrive, some people assume that you're going to have more price changes using Hyperdrive. That's not what it's doing. It's not like tripling your price updates, like the total number. It's instead decreasing the amount of time it takes to reflect a price change. And here's what I mean by that. We've always had instant repricing. And I think if you're paying for anything less than instant repricing, you're basically wasting your money. But instant doesn't technically mean instant. It means instant in our system. But instant really means 1.5 to 2 minutes on average from when we instantly submit it to Amazon. We have to wait for it to come back to be like, cool, it's confirmed, accepted, all that good stuff. That's 1.5 to 2 minutes on average. During peak time, it could be 5-10 minutes that's reflected, right? That's just their system. Now, we found a unique way during our rebuild for 1.0 to where up to 50 SKUs, there is a technical limit here. We can do that 1.5 to 2 minute round trip in less than 10 seconds. So it's less that you're getting, again, far more price changes. It's the fact that we're able to reflect it faster, which I would argue is even more important, because you're saying, here's where it should be, get there as fast as possible, right? And so in theory, yeah, if you do need to make that many price changes, we can, right? So it's going to reflect the same number of price changes, but we can do it faster. So it is possible that if it's a highly competitive listing, that you do have more price changes because you're able to react to more of them. What ends up happening is you react to 1, 3 happen while we're waiting, yours gets accepted, and now we have to say, cool, we don't care about these, what's true now, right? So in a lot of cases, instant repricing can actually only get to the number that are available, if that makes sense. I'm trying to like vocalize this in a way that rationally makes sense. But basically, you can reprice in theory up to 12 times in the span that it takes your competition not using hyperdrive once. That's assuming that there were that many price changes required in that period of time. So it's allowing you to react and be public with your updated price within 10 seconds is the best way to kind of understand it. But Casey, if there's anything you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I think really just boiling it down, it allows you to deploy those or Aura rather to deploy those price changes more quickly. With us bringing down that initial pricing update time, Amazon's able to receive it. And then if you are, like Dylan said, on a competitive listing, this could lead you to holding the buy box for a longer period of time as the other repricers try to react on their more standard 2-minute lag time for those updates. So really just increases how quickly those price changes are updated as opposed to increasing the number of price changes themselves.
Yeah. See, Monis has a little problem here. I had a trial, I became a customer. I had an issue with one item that sold way beyond my minimum price. How can I find out what happened? So what I would recommend is you actually jump into support, again, that live chat, send us over the SKU as well. And ideally the day that occurred, so we can take a deep dive and see what was true at that period of time. Most of the time when we see these cases, what happened is one of the fees was either not included from Amazon or was adjusted, in which case your min value also adjusted with that. So technically the price was within the min max, but then it readjusted back up when the fee became available again. So that could be the case. But just to make sure we really can tell you exactly what's happening, reach out to support because we can deep dive into your particular data and tell you exactly what was going down there. See, Anthony. So hyperdrive would be ideal on a listing with 50 offers versus one with 5 offers. Not necessarily. It really comes down to how competitive a listing is. Because if all 5 people are actively repricing really aggressively, it could still be useful. But yeah, I think generally speaking, listings that have more competition and not just sellers, right? Like there's a difference between the number of sellers and the number of people competing. Usually it's a smaller percentage. So however many people are actively competing, as that number is increased, yes, that's when you'll heavily want to consider hyperdrive. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. I like hyperdrive. Hyperdrive is kind of fun because it's incredibly complicated on the back end, but we've tried to make it as simple from a user interaction where you just click a toggle and you're like, do it, please. And we're like, all right, cool. Got you. See, Anthony, how is Aura's hyperdrive different from SellerSnap's yo-yo setting? So these are 2 very different concepts. So yo-yo basically takes you up and down, right? On some fixed kind of period. Hyperdrive is not necessarily dictating where your price should go. It's reflecting the price change based on your strategy or Maven, the model, faster is what it's basically doing. So those 2 things are very different. Now you could conceptually compare Maven to a yo-yo strategy. What a lot of people do with a yo-yo strategy, though, it's very time bound. It's like once an hour, spike the price. That's better than not doing it, in my opinion, but it's not really optimal because if you're doing something based on time and you're just going to a fixed value, like your max price, you're actually missing out on quite a lot of optimization. So you might only be getting 40 to 60% of the way to where you could have gone. Whereas with Maven, what we're doing is we're doing it behaviorally. We're asking all the time, does it make sense to do that now? And if it does, where do I go? Where do I go is so important because you don't just go to your max value. That actually doesn't make a ton of sense. Instead, we take you to the optimal price. That optimal price is the balance between sales velocity and profitability. And by the way, it changes moment by moment, right? As the demand changes, as the number of competitors changes, as the BSR changes, all these variables get packaged up and we calculate this optimum price in real time. And so what we're not doing is saying, oh, we're going to take your price super high. That sounds nice, but the reality is you might only get sales 10% of the time there. But if you're going to your optimal price, which is a little bit more reasonable, but still very much more profitable, you might get sales there 50% of the time. So you actually make more money, right? And this is like basic kind of economics where like there's the optimal price. And if you go above that, yeah, you can still technically get sales there, but far less. And so you're trying to find this balance of where do I, at what price do I get the healthy balance between I'm maximizing my profitability, but not giving away too much sales velocity? And what a lot of people do is they over optimize for either end of the spectrum instead of finding the balance, which is really hard, which is why we do it algorithmically. Instead, what they say is, well, I'm going to be really high price and just hope things go well, or I'm going to be really low price and just move a ton. Either way, you're giving up something. We're trying to say, what if there's a balance here? And as that balance is fluctuating, that's where we want you to be at. That's kind of how we're doing that. Or it sounds superior to me. Yeah, we do it very differently. I think that's the big difference here is like the way we approach building repricing is, how do we take these fundamental concepts that make a lot of sense and are really hard to implement, and then implement them in a way that is very flexible? I think a lot of what repricers do is they give you a lot of complexity in terms of settings. There's a ton of settings. You can do X, Y, and Z. Great. Now you have to go and understand how to do that perfectly. You have to go watch a video of how to do this and set this up and blah, blah, blah. And you can mess it up. And like, I don't like that. Ideally, you can't mess it up. You know what I mean? Like, how do we remove the human error element from what we've built? And do it in a way that, like, you have to kind of start with some truths, right? What is true? Well, things change and not every listing is the same. And Amazon doesn't tell us what works and what doesn't work. So why don't we take a step back? And this is why we didn't launch Maven as yet another strategy. We said, no, it's a model, because it's actually understanding what is changing and what is true, defining that actual, success metric, which for us is you are at that optimal price. And then based on all this information, as it's changing, what behaviors do we need to utilize to close that gap? So it's a very different philosophy and approach to repricing, especially utilizing AI within that. A lot of what happens is just way too rigid, in my opinion. And I've talked about this before, where there's this version of historical automation, which I call rigid automation, which is like, here's the rules, and if something doesn't fit perfectly in the rules, it breaks. Well, the reality is, like, we live in chaos. Like, things change rapidly. So you need to transition from this rigid automation to this non-rigid automation, this flexible automation that can say, cool, I can kind of reason here. I can just take in the inputs, understand how we measure success. And I can say, okay, based on that, let me reason about what I should do. And then let's do that. That's a whole different paradigm. And that's why I think when we first launched this, a lot of people compared us to other companies and we're like, oh, you're just doing that. I'm like, actually, fundamentally not. And it's hard to get some people to make the cognitive leap of the fact that this is a very different paradigm when it comes to repricing. It is a very new thing. But for us, that's what gets us excited and pumped. So I love this question, by the way, Casey. Pure curiosity. What happens if two people are selling the same product and both are using Aura? If we hold all else equal to make this work, what will happen is you will both go to the optimal price and crush sales together. That's it. That's it. Now, the optimal price itself can change, of course. Again, you're not just going to go to one price and sit there forever. Demand can change, right? Now, if we're not holding all things equal, because you can't, the reality of it is every seller has different min values, and that can very much change. Everybody has different buy costs, right? So if your min is lower than my min by a large margin, and the optimal price is between those two, you're going to lose. One of those sellers is going to lose, right? So there are a lot of factors in there. So it's hard for me to say exactly what would happen without knowing all the details of a particular scenario. But again, academically speaking, holding all else equal, you'll sell at the optimal price and crush it. That's basically what's going to happen. You'll both get the most optimal margin without missing out on sales velocity, is what will happen. I love this follow up from Anthony's comment here. It's okay. I don't have to be humble about it. That's very, yeah, I like that. We try to be, because I think, we love competition. We love when companies are doing amazing things. I think there's a lot of shadiness that happens in the Amazon software space, unfortunately. And when we have competition that competes in a healthy way, like SellerSnap does, I'm still going to respect them. We actually hang out with them at conferences. So, no shade towards SellerSnap. They've been an awesome team and do some incredible work. For us, that's what drives us to do better and say, how do we do this in such a fundamentally different way than has been done? And so it's a driving, it's almost like you're trying to outpace your competition, but while also mainly focusing on driving value for your users. And like that's the big focus there, is like, how do we just put on our nerdy hats and say, how do we do this in like the most coolest way possible and make this just an easy thing to do? Because a lot of what happens in the Amazon software space is, to give you more functionality or performance, you're given more settings. That actually creates more cognitive load for the individual, for the user. And instead we said, well, look at what Apple does. Apple actually has a lot of complexity to its operating system, but they abstract away the complexity and say, we're going to do that for you. You don't need to worry about it. You just need to worry about this thing. This is just how you interact with it. And so our challenge is, how do we take highly technical engineering complexities, get rid of that from your perspective and say, all you need to worry about is the interface. And that's super simple. Like hyperdrive is very complicated from an engineering perspective. All you have to do is say, do it or don't do it. And like, that's it. And for us, that's what's really fun, right? It's like, there's this, this allegory, if you will, for automation. And it kind of focuses on like the future of work, which is, there's a factory, a man and a dog. And the man is there to take care of the factory. And the dog is there to make sure that the man doesn't touch anything. Well, that's kind of interesting, right? Because the whole idea is like, you should build the factory in such a way that it can take care of itself, this non-rigid automation. And it should not require the human to be in the loop controlling everything, because algorithms, AI, things like this can do that for them in a better way, in a more high performant way. And so our whole thing is like, how do I give you more performance, but require less time from you, because your time is better spent on sourcing. So how do we free up more time for you to go sourcing while still giving you more performance? That's the big challenge, I would say. See, Mike here is a long one. Was wondering, there is a new software that was developed by two well-known Amazon sellers that was just released. It's supposed to replace IL. They had a live and there was questions about integrating, and they said to have you guys reach out if interested. How would you go about that? Just post feedback or contact support, or are you guys aware of it already? We are aware of it, actually. Just had a conversation about this. So that's something we most likely will be pursuing. So, it's kind of TBD. I know it's kind of early days, but that is a conversation that is open, is what I will say. It's a good one, though. I like that one. I feel like we're jamming. This is great.
Yeah, it's good to be back after last week off.
Yeah. I have a little, like, when we take a little bit of a break there, I tend to have a little bit more energy coming back into it. Not trying to default to talking about AI as much. Let's see. Vortenac has a question. I'm using AI strategy, so using Maven. I set my ROI to 25%. Should I manually enter min and max? No. So actually, the mins and maxes are going to be taken care of for you. Maxes will dynamically calculate. We have our own calculation for doing that, so you don't have to enter in anything. As long as we have your costs, then Maven will calculate that 25% minimum ROI for you for every single listing. You're good to go. So again, I want you to be doing less work. Anything we can get rid of that we can automate for you, we want to do. So you can basically just not deal with those. One thing I would say with Maven, and we've talked about this before, the lower the minimum ROI, actually the better. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, because people are like, oh, well, that means it's going to go there. It doesn't do that. It's not designed for that. We're not other companies. So why this is important is it tends to increase performance. So you're actually you could see, it depends on where your buy costs and stuff like that are. But as we've seen working directly with users, as they lower the minimum ROI, Maven has more room to basically deploy its strategy in real time to get you where it needs to get to. So the only thing I would say, just because, I see the 25%, we've seen this at 30%. We lowered it to 15% ROI and the performance went through the roof. Consider lowering that a little bit at a time and seeing if that increases performance. If it doesn't, that means you're in a good spot. Don't worry about it. Again, that being lower is not a big deal. We've tested going to 0% ROI and had no issues. But that's one thing I do want to highlight, especially when people start talking about min values relative to Maven. The lower, the better it seems to be. But basically, if you're not getting added performance by lowering that, you're in a good spot. But Casey, anything you want to add on to that?
Just one thing related to costs and auto-calculated mins and maxes, Aura will automatically account for your referral and fulfillment fees. But if you are an FBM seller, any shipping, prep, or storage fees are not factored in. So if you are FBM seller on that listing where you're using Maven, you want to make sure to include definitely those shipping costs so that that is accounted for when making those ROI calculations for you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot on the docket that we're pretty pumped about that we just can't share, which is eating me up on the inside because I definitely want to. See, Monis, can you control the max and min price that I set up manually on Amazon? One thing that is happening, or won't take those into consideration, and the listing will get suppressed. So we do not take those into consideration. We actually don't see those; they're blind to one another. So what I recommend to sellers is do not set mins and maxes in Seller Central. They will only create headaches. Only, ever. Min and max values in Seller Central, the functionality of that is to remove your listing if it goes outside those bounds. But those bounds are not dynamic. They're not factoring anything in. They're just whatever you said. So if you can remove them, in some cases you can't, but in the cases where you can actually remove them, please do. If not, actually widen the range. So actually go lower in the min, as high as you can on the max. That way the min max range in Seller Central is wider than it is in Aura. If you do that, you'll be in a good hands. But moving forward, definitely don't be setting those in Seller Central. They only create issues. See, and I'm just lazy to go through all the listings. Yeah, it makes sense. I am too. That's why I'm like, hey, just don't do that work. Let Aura handle it for you, and less problems will happen and more performance will occur. So again, how do I give you less work to do and better performance? We're kind of designed basically to do that, which is nice. So do a lot less. It is interesting. Something we've been thinking a lot about is kind of the future of selling. I'll be speaking at AMZ United in August in New Jersey and kind of putting together, John, sorry. Finn, blink twice if Dylan is an AI. I have cloned my voice and I have cloned my video, but I will not do that to you yet. It's not stable enough. But a lot of what I'm thinking about is what is the future for sellers, and I think it's going to be more complex. Not necessarily in a bad way. I think there's more channels. Like going multi-channel is going to start making, and it is already starting to make a lot more sense. You have Walmart starting to really grow. Target, I think, is going to come online pretty fast. I've been hearing murmurs of Home Depot coming online as well. So I think this model that Amazon has created will carry over to other retailers where they get to carry far less inventory from a cash perspective themselves and just take fees, which is just a better business model from a cash flow perspective. So I think that's what's going to happen, but then that creates its own problem of how do you manage that complexity in a simple way? And I think that's where software is going to have to come into play. I think you're going to need software that can interface with multiple channels and not just the current channels, but channels to come, and really standardize a lot of the data in there. And I think you're going to end up having to have the central place to manage all these crazy things. And you see this in enterprise already with brick and mortars, larger companies where they have ERP systems. So massive enterprise resource planning tools where they interface with everything. And they say, cool, this is our hub. And then here's how everything's going out. And it's crazy. I think you're going to have that. That's something we're starting to think of pretty heavily here at Aura. But I think that's going to happen. But what's nice is we have this intelligence kind of coming online with AI that I think is going to help with some of the reasoning in between that. Because you're going to have to handle far more data in a way that rationally makes sense. And you're going to have to rationalize through that data to understand, okay, I got 100 units. How do I split that perfectly? Maximize ROI, all these different things, given the constraints of every single channel, there's a lot of complexity to that. And to me, that tells me it's one big math equation, which software is pretty good at math. So, I think there's a solid solution there, which is nice. But I think more sellers need to start thinking through that lens of being okay with the coming complexity changes and understanding that software is going to fix that pretty fast. See, another question here. Do you recommend using Maven's strategy over the other strategy? When should you use the other strategy over AI? Casey, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, so I generally recommend using Maven if your main goal is the best profit margin. With Maven designed to optimize between sales velocity and margin, it does tend to lean a little bit more towards the margin side of things, mostly due to downward pressure on listings from all the competition and people trying to win the buy box, things of that nature. So if your main goal is maximizing margin, you'll definitely want to use Maven. With that being said, Maven's not specifically designed to target and win the buy box. It does win the buy box in various scenarios, and that's always good. But if you're looking to win the buy box or your main goal is sales velocity, I would recommend using our buy box targeting strategy. So those are kind of my general high level recommendations without knowing any more details around specific listings or business setup. With margin, or for margin, go with Maven. For velocity, go with the buy box strategy. And if you're afraid of, getting into a price duel, if you know that one of your listings is very competitive with another seller using a repricer, you can always set that buy box targeting strategy to match the price of the buy box as opposed to pricing below. So that's kind of a little bit of a extra safeguard there. But velocity, go with the buy box targeting. Margin, go with Maven.
Yeah. So Mike has a good question here. Using Maven, and notice I am currently tied for the buy box with one other person, but third place is like a $4 difference. What is the best way to get that more money at third place and let the one person run out? Should I create a separate strategy for specific ASINs or a higher min so it will price with the third place? Let me think this one through. So Maven's is not designed to run people down, sell them out, and pop back up, directly. Some of that can occur organically. What I would venture to guess, and again, it's hard to answer some of these without looking at like the actual listing itself. If I'm looking at your listing in Aura and I'm seeing that Maven's popping the price up, then it's actually attempting to do that itself. So it kind of depends on where the optimal price is at. You could actually be at the optimal price, in which case, again, this is where you get into the problem of there's a seller higher than me. Yes, but is that necessarily a good or a bad thing? Because if you were to go up that $4, the sales velocity could be dramatically different. Now, listen, if you got 3 units, probably not a big deal, right? But if you got 100 something units, that velocity does matter for your cash flow. So without knowing all the details, it's hard to give a really salient answer that would help here. What I would recommend is reach out to support so we can actually, like in live chat, so we can take a look at the listing itself and the competition and see what's really happening and give you a more direct answer. I'm just hesitant to tell you to do something without having all the facts in my head. Because again, could be at the optimal price. Optimal price could actually be at that $4 and Maven is pushing you up, but Amazon keeps wanting to, not pull the buy box up with you. It's hard to tell. So I just want to make sure we're giving you really detailed recommendations there. But Casey, if there's anything that comes to mind for you, that would be worth looking at.
Nothing specific in regards to Maven. The one thought I had is maybe you create a buy box targeting strategy where you reprice instead of 2 cents below the buy box. Maybe you do like $1 or $2 there. Then that would let that person run out. And then when you become the buy box winner, or it would default to the maintenance section, which is designed to maximize your margin. So it would then close the gap between you and your next competitor. That's the only thought that I had come to mind there, Mike, but I would definitely reach out to support so we can kind of just take a closer look at that specific listing and see what may be going on. But that was just kind of one outside of the box idea that I had there that may kind of help that situation on that specific listing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like kind of shifting away from Maven, utilizing a set rule-based strategy for a period of time to get that seller off and then jump back over to Maven essentially is what you could do. But yeah, reach out to support. We're happy to take a deeper dive on that and tell you exactly what's going on. No, definitely no newbie questions. This is exactly what this session is for. This is why I love this concept, because this is what it's here for. It's, super advanced questions, but also I'm brand new and I have no idea what to do. Awesome. Like, we want to dive deep into those things because it's really frustrating when you start to use a tool and there's not much support and you feel like you can't answer a question or ask questions. Even the newbie things, like, so definitely no newbie questions, like bring all the questions you have. That's why I've got this little banner here. I want all the questions, all of them, all of them, all of them. But I appreciate that. See, Anthony, if I wanted to liquidate inventory, should I set a max price and not worry about the minimum price? I think about this in stages or phases, if you will. So you will have to set a min price or will not reprice without a minimum. That's a safety net we have built in. Now you can set that to $0 manually, certainly, but I don't really recommend doing that, because basically what's happening in these phases is you're trying to make good money and then you need to move it faster. And then you straight up just need to get out of it. The moving it faster, that middle phase, is where I would say you need to become more aggressive in your repricing and set your minimum ROI to 0%. Because if we can at least not lose money, I think that's a good thing, right? We don't want to push it down too fast or too far. Now, if that's still not working and it's just a really bad listing and things just have really gone south, yeah, you might have to take a hit. In which case so what I do is I say, set a strategy that's going to automatically calculate your minimum at 0% ROI. Let that run for a little bit. If it's still not moving, manually go in and override that listing, because you can't set negative values for the ROI stuff in the strategies, but you can override that manually. And why this is helpful is you know what the break even is now. You're just going to say, cool, I'm going to take 10% off that, or I'm going to take it down by two extra dollars and see if that makes the difference. That way you're not, because think about this too, right? If you're setting negative ROIs in your strategies and you accidentally set that strategy to a very profitable thing, that, especially with rule-based, that could create a really bad scenario for you. And we're trying to avoid those potential pitfalls where sellers could accidentally do something that it worked as designed, but you didn't mean to do that. And so we try to have these safety nets built in so that, like, it's harder for you to accidentally mess things up, because we're all human, right? Like we all mess things up. So that's kind of how I would approach it. But Casey, I know you have some good recommendations on liquidation stuff.
Yeah, Anthony, I would recommend pretty much everything that Dylan just said was pretty spot on. If you do go to our help docs library, we do have a step-by-step article around creating a liquidation strategy. It does point you in the direction of targeting the buy box with 0% ROI, starting there, and then entering those manual mins to kind of drop into the negative profit margin if you're really just trying to offload the inventory no matter what. That's typically what I recommend: buy box, 0% ROI, going from there, and then working downwards if you're really just trying to get that off the shelves.
Yeah. Nice. We're pretty heavy on documentation. So wherever we can write down words or record a video. I know, Casey, you're recording a lot of like how-to videos right now, because I know for myself, like I can read all day long, but I'm a visual learner, a hands-on learner. So anytime I can watch a video of somebody doing the thing I'm trying to do, so much easier. So actually we have a little studio that Casey's in. Technically it's a conference room, but we convert it. It's a hybrid, right? So we can convert it. We've got a little drop down, cool stuff there. But Casey and Finn are recording some awesome how-to videos that take a lot of the things that come up in these conversations, and let's just create a 5-minute video that just answers that one question really well. And let's pair that with a written help desk article, documentation, so that no matter how you learn, we got you covered there as much as possible. So we're going to start rolling out some of those. They're a little more time consuming than just sitting down writing. I will say that, because we want them to be high quality. So I know you recorded a whole one and the fan kicked off midway and we're like, all right, we got to redo that one. So that's been fun. But these are the things that for us, I think, are super important in the way we approach success. It's not just like we're here to answer all the questions, like, yeah, but the more we can get Casey and Finn out of conversations, the better. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a way of like self-serve. Like if you could just get an answer immediately without having to wait on a human, without having to think about, support open right now, like that's just better, right? Like how do we reduce the time it takes for you to go from I have a question to I got the answer, like directly? And that's so important. So even the way we write support articles, I can't stand when I jump into a support article and it's like a book. I'm like, dude, what the heck? Like I have one simple question, like just give me the answer. So here shortly, we're going to start experimenting with some tech that will hopefully take that to the next level. I'm kind of hopeful, but also like it's early days, so we'll see how it plays out. But I'm pretty hopeful that we can make our success in support work even faster, more efficient, higher quality, all that good stuff, all things we tend to focus on every single week. So pumped about that.
Yeah, definitely cautiously optimistic with the tech things that we have at our disposal. But yeah, totally agree. If we are able to get out of the how can I do this, that gets us or allows us to spend more time on the why should I do this, or what should I do in this scenario? And that's where we focus on best practices, things that are going to actually make an impact instead of how do I connect my marketplace or things like that. So it is a balance of having those quick answers, but then also being able to go more in depth in the scenarios where there are a lot of complexities, whether it's a specific listing or a whole slew of inventory that you have that you're trying to get rid of. So we always want to be there to help you folks, but if you can get an automated quick how-to answer, then that lets us spend more time on the stuff that's actually going to move the bottom line for you.
Yeah, I kind of view this like an inverted pyramid. Like at the top of the pyramid is like all the consistent Q&A stuff that's like there's a direct answer to that question. It's like, cool, automate that. You don't need to wait for a human. A human doesn't need to type that out. The answer is very clear cut. And then you get like one layer deeper, which is like might require a little bit more like nuance to it, but there's still a direct answer. And then at the very bottom of that pyramid is like that last like 10 to 20% of things that really require a human, like what we're doing here, which is somebody like, oh, I've got this big problem. Cool. I actually don't want to just give you an answer. I'd rather dive into your data and tell you exactly what's happening. That's where humans shine incredibly well. When somebody's like, hey, what's your operating hours? Yeah, you're going to get a bot for that. like I can give it to you immediately. It doesn't change. But if you're like, hey, I have a listing and I'm really struggling to understand what's happening, awesome. You're going directly to a human because we need to be in the loop on this one. So we're very cognizant of how that gets built out. And honestly, like it's one of my favorite things that I worked on in the early days of Aura, like kind of understanding that world, because, when we launched VinDrive CRM, the way we did it, I was just answering questions. I didn't know what I'm doing. And then I was like, you know what? I should probably understand how this world works and dove into so many resources and try to understand what are the models that people think through. How do you make decisions in the support success world? How do you even define success here? And we started to understand that, lay it all out and say, okay, cool. Based on this. And what's funny, by the way, now that I'm thinking about it, very similar to Maven. What is true? How do we define success? What do we need to do to hit success? Like, what are the behaviors and actions and things we need to go execute on to make that happen? It's the same kind of philosophy. And so that, I think, has given us a North Star to build a world-class support system and team. What's crazy is it doesn't even take that many people. I love when I talk to other software companies that are like half our size and they have like 3 people in the inbox at all times, like full time. I'm like, man, we got Casey, man. Finn jumps in when he needs to. Like, it's crazy. But that was like one of the big pillars for us as founders when we started the company, was like, support has to be amazing, man. Like I'm so sick of dealing with other companies, especially in the Amazon software space, where it's like, you can email us 24/7. Like, yeah, but it's taking you 8 hours to respond with an additional question. And like, I can tell you didn't even read what I asked of you, and like, so just approaching things differently. And I think this is also true for sellers, right? Like if you're coming up against a problem, you'll understand and clearly define what the problem is, and then just go find the solution. Most things we do are not 0 to 1. We're not solving physics problems here, right? Like we're solving business problems and technical problems. Like there's always a solution. You just have to go find who's already done it. And that's what's so funny is most of the people who do this kind of stuff share it online for free. I have this fundamental belief that you can pick any one niche thing. There's one person on the internet who has a YouTube channel, a blog, TikTok, whatever, and they exclusively talk about that one thing super in depth, and they want to share. And they will probably give you time if you're like, hey, I have big questions related to this thing. Can we jump onto a 30-minute Zoom call? Yes, they want to talk about it. So, if it comes down to hiring or sourcing or, accounting, like there's always somebody who can just solve that problem for you. And this gets into the whole concept of like leverage, right? Like there's different forms of leverage. There's technology like software, there's capital, but there's also people. People can make big connections to help you solve your big problems. People can just tell you the answer to the thing in a 5-minute text conversation than you going through a $5,000 course. right? And I think the more sellers can internalize this and utilize their network of people to solve problems, I think you'll grow exponentially faster than anybody else, because everybody else is just trying to do it themselves and trying to recreate the wheel that has already seemingly been perfected in a certain way. So, when you make that mindset shift, that perspective shift, a lot of things change. And people start thinking you're really, really smart when you start to do that. And it's like, no, you're just asking questions as you should, right? What we learned in school. Well, I guess not really in US schools, because you're not supposed to collaborate or really ask many questions. But in the real world, you do. You collaborate, you cheat. And cheating in business is not bad, because you're just saying, oh, you already did it that way, I'm just going to copy and paste that sucker. Great. Problem solved. It's not like when we set out to build the customer success, process and infrastructure and all that stuff, that we said, oh, we know exactly what to do here. And like, we're boom, 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 boom. No, we started with some first principles, but we found what was already working really, really well and just adopted that. What are the existing best practices? Start there and then build upon those. So you start with a good foundation, which I think is so important. Let's see, Tony, we have about 4-ish minutes here, so we're going to start to wrap up. Tony, is there a quick way in Aura to run a report that shows you when available quantity is 0? Not necessarily, because we look at quantity as a whole. We do show you subsets if you hover, but if you're like filtering on quantity, we're going to look at that total value. So there's no good way to do that quite yet, unfortunately. That's a good idea. What I would say, Tony, though, is go to feedback.goaura.com and add that as a feature request, because I think that's a great idea. And then that way other people can search for it, upvote it, add comments, tell us exactly what you want to do with this. That way we know exactly how to go about, kind of conceptualizing this and building this out. But I think that's a great feature request. Nice. So we got a few more minutes here. We'll start to wrap up. Casey, anything that's top of mind for you that you want to start wrapping up with?
Top of mind? No, I mean, it's been good to, like I said at the top of the call, really work more closely with some of the early stage users. I definitely want to emphasize anybody who is new to Aura, or that maybe there's been some people migrating from legacy over to 1.0 recently. If you're new to 1.0 in general, definitely reach out to support and set up a call with Finn. It's been in the space for more than 4 years. He'll definitely be able to get you set up based on your business, your goals, and be very specific to you in addition to our best practices. So definitely take advantage of the option to schedule that call. And then outside of that, we're always there in chat to help with any quick questions as well. So don't hesitate to reach out if there is anything we can help with.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, if you're not on early stage and you're looking for it, definitely apply for that. Again, two requirements: less than 10K a month in sales, and you're not currently an Aura user, and that's it. That's all we care about. So get in there, use that. If you haven't done an onboarding session like Casey mentioned, please do that. It's free, it's available. It's not a huge time suck. It's like 20, 25 minutes. And we tend to see people go from, I feel a little overwhelmed, to I feel like a superhuman and I got this covered, and like, get out of my way. And what you don't leave that conversation with, by the way, is a ton of notes that you need to go take action on. We will take the action with you in your account live. So when you leave that, if we recommended a strategy, it's probably already there and working. So you're leaving with a wealth of knowledge, and also like just a better account. Like, we'll be sharing your screen in your account, doing things with you. So there's no questions we won't answer. Doesn't matter how newbie they are. Like, we love those too, because we want you to feel like a superhuman at the end of that. But yeah, I would say biggest CTA on this, get an onboarding session. They're great. And Finn's awesome. So yeah. Awesome. With that, we will be back next week again, every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. EST, live office hours. Just come with your questions, ideas, feedback. We want it all. This is just an open session where Casey and I will geek for a little bit, but then dive deep into all the questions you guys have. We love doing these. So definitely come back next week. If you got any value out of this, definitely share it too. If you're on socials watching this, give us a reshare. The more people that can see this, the more value we can provide. But with that, we'll let you get back to the rest of your week.
Yeah. One more thing on the onboarding calls actually as well. You can actually ask Finn to record it for you while you're on there. Yes. And then afterwards he can send you the recording. So then you're not stuck with just our help docs. You actually get the video of your conversation referenced there. So yeah, but yeah,
good highlight.
Have a good rest of the week.
Nice. Thanks everyone.